Modders have just fixed one of Fallout 4's biggest issues that it's had for nearly 10 years. Somehow this has not yet been addressed, but thanks to a wonderful breakthrough in modding, some really talented animator has now fixed an issue with the game that I've been having not only as a user, but as somebody who makes mods as well. One that I think is going to be game-changing, pretty revolutionary, and honestly is going to open up an entirely new category of mods that can be made. So today, we're going to be checking out that, as well as a couple of other new releases in this week's Mods Weekly. So, go ahead and sit tight, we've got a lot to check out. Before we begin, if you enjoy these kinds of videos, or you enjoy the mods I make over on the Nexus, consider checking me out on Patreon. It's a great way to support my work directly. If you're interested, that is linked down in the description below, but of course, it is completely optional. Now then, let's go ahead and get started with today's first mod, that new revolutionary mod known as Super Mutant Equality, a Super Mutant weapon expansion by Brainstormepilog. Now, this thing is huge. This is going to be a completely new set of animations for the Super Mutants, and since this mod has come out, it has pretty much doubled in size. This mod is going to allow Super Mutants to use more types of weapons. Now, on the surface, that might not sound like a big deal to most of you, but the Super Mutants pretty much only had access to like 3 or 4 guns in the vanilla game. They could use pipe guns, assault rifles, the minigun, and I believe the missile launcher, and melee weapons. But melee weapons don't really count for this. They don't have animations for anything else. So if you're a mod maker and you want to make a really cool Super Mutant gun, you're very limited in terms of what kind of animations you can use. Well, now Brainstormepilog has opened that up by pretty much making almost every type of gun something that can be made for Super Mutants. And when this first came out, it was just a handful of guns like the combat rifle, the Nuka World AK, and the SMG. But now that has opened up to 10mm pistols and a couple of other rifles. There's a lot more that you can actually do now with the Super Mutants. And what's really cool is there are already patches utilizing this and making Super Mutants much more interesting. Now, on its own, this mod is more of a modder's resource. It is something that you can use as a user, but what it's going to do is basically just add all of these animations as things that are available to the Super Mutants. It's not going to change their level lists or add the neat guns to them, anything like that. On its own, this mod just adds the animations. However, if you're just using that, you can actually use this still. If you have, say, Strong as a companion, you can give him a lot more guns than you were able to give him before, so that is definitely nice. But there are a few mods that really utilize this. Now, before we get into that, it is important to note that anything that uses these vanilla rigs in third person is already going to be compatible. That includes a lot of my mods because of the way that we set up animations. There are some things that just work with this automatically. However, that's just going to mean that the animations work. You'll still have to give them to a companion. But thanks to Pig, we have a lot more options now. Pig has gone ahead and done a ton of work to add a bunch of patches, not only for our own mods, but for a bunch of popular mods that are already out on the Nexus, allowing Super Mutants to use a ton of your favorite weapon mods. And what Pig's mods are going to do is a couple of things. It is going to change the subgraphs if necessary so that Super Mutants can actually use some of these guns, but also for all of these, it's going to add leveled list injection to the Super Mutants. Again, this is going to include vanilla weapons, a ton of modded weapons, and nearly all of my modded weapons that do fit Super Mutant animations available thanks to the Super Mutant Equality mod. So now you're going to be able to see Super Mutants using a ton of different guns. That means any of your favorite mods that are out there may now be used on Super Mutants. That includes things of mine like the BAR, the FAL, the Riot Shotgun, the 12.7mm pistol, a ton of really cool options. But what that also means is now we can craft weapons specifically for Super Mutants. If we wanted to make a big, junky rifle that is made by Super Mutants out of really crude pieces of metal, that's something we have a lot more options with now thanks to all of these animations. Again, as a user, this may not seem like a lot to you, but for modders, this is amazing. And if you are a user who really wants more variety in your Commonwealth, this is another great way to get it because now Super Mutants can use a ton of new guns, and there may be even more types of weapons that you'll be able to see in the future that are Super Mutant exclusive weapons, which is something we haven't really seen before, and that's going to be really cool. Now, while that mod is absolutely revolutionary, we have some other mods to check out because this is still Mods Weekly. We've got some other stuff that has come out recently that I do want to showcase. So let's go ahead and move on to our next mod. And the next mod is going to be known as the Agram 2000 Submachine Gun by Winterworld 19. Now, this is Winterworld's first attempt at making a standalone gun. This thing's going to be completely new with new models, new textures, and new animations. I've been following the progress of this thing as it's been developed over on my Discord, and now that it's released, I'm quite happy because the Agram is a really cool and really unique gun, and the animations for this guy that are brand new could be used to recreate some more really cool SMGs, so I'm really happy that this set exists now. The Agram 2000 is a funky little SMG with a really cool integrated foregrip. It has a bunch of attachments over at the weapons workbench, as well as, again, custom animations that are brand new exclusive to this gun right now. This weapon is going to be integrated into the Wasteland. It will spawn at level 8, and it'll spawn on some pretty common enemy types like Raiders, Gunners, and the Minutemen. Additionally, this mod comes in a couple of versions. The vanilla version is going to use the 38 ammunition type, which is going to be fine if you do use the vanilla ammo. And for once, I'm not going to be talking about munitions. Instead, this mod is patched to use armaments for 9mm. Now, I don't personally use armaments, but I know there are a few of you out there who probably do. And for this mod, I could see why that might be something. It is a little bit more modern. I wouldn't say it's ultra modern. I think it is a pretty old SMG, but it does have some pretty modern attachments available at the weapons workbench, including a few optics and some pretty modern looking suppressors. Now that said, I'm sure somebody could patch this thing very easily to use munitions if you're into that kind of thing, because this weapon does use 9mm in real life. Otherwise, 38 in vanilla is perfectly fine as well. It is Fallout 4 after all. Ammo is relatively interchangeable in this universe because nobody seems to really care. But if you're someone who does, there's already an armaments patch, and hopefully we'll see one for munitions in the not too far future. This is a really cool, really funky gun. Not something that was necessarily something on my hit list for weapons I wanted to make myself, but definitely one that I wanted to see a mod for Fallout 4. It's one of those iconic weapons that I've seen around in different pieces of media. Most notably, I've seen it in Far Cry quite a bit, and something I wanted to see in Fallout 4, so now we actually have one. So it's really cool that Winterworld decided to pick up this model, pretty much an unfinished project by Nova Finch and iCodeI, and now we have a nice finished product. I personally would like to see a little bit more variation when it comes to some of the attachments. I do think that the super modern optics and the super modern suppressor aren't my favorite things. You guys know me, I like the retro stuff, but it is still a very nice weapon, and the animations on this thing are really nice and really crisp. This is a really good weapon, and I think it's something that you should consider. If you like the design of this funky SMG, it's one I'd consider checking out. This, along with all of the other mods in this video, will be linked down in the description below if you'd like to do so. Now, if you are a fan of vintage and retro, we've got a really nice weapon coming up known as the Express Rifle by the 6th Messenger. Now, this is not a real weapon. This is actually entirely fictional. So for a pretty fictional design, this is actually pretty dang cool. It's going to combine two ideas. You may remember the Model 1887 lever-action shotgun or a rolling block rifle, two very different weapons that have now been combined into essentially one single package. What's really funny is that it's actually going to be using both of my mods as reference for that, using the animations from my 1887 thanks to Blones, and the idea of the rolling block rifle that I've already made to make a new single-shot 4570 gun. Now, if you already have the rolling block rifle, this thing is going to be a little bit redundant, but if you're into this more, it's definitely something that you get to make a choice for depending on what you like. While the rolling block does have its own custom animations designed for the rolling block, this is going to take a different approach, making use of the 1887 lever action animations, but it is only going to hold one round. So essentially, every time you shoot, you're going to pop the lever open, pop in a new round, and close the lever. It's actually a pretty clever idea. It's a pretty interesting way to make use of animations like that for a totally new weapon design. Gotta say, I'm kind of a fan of it. It's a pretty cool idea, especially for something that's completely fictional. One interesting note of this weapon is it is modeled in Blender, like most guns are, but it's also textured in Blender, which is something you don't see super often. Usually when you do see it, it's not the greatest because Blender textures aren't necessarily the best option unless you're an absolute expert in using them. Substance Painter is definitely a lot easier to jump into, but Blender textures are a bit different, and I have to say these ones aren't terrible. They're actually pretty good. If you had told me that somebody textured this in Substance Painter, I would say that's possibly true. The only things I notice is the wood is a bit vibrant and the metal is a little bit strange, but it's not bad at all. It is definitely serviceable and looks like something that could fit easily in your load order alongside other weapons. That and this mod does make use of some vanilla assets in terms of attachments, which helps it blend in a little bit more with some of the vanilla weapons as well. This thing does also come with a good bit of customization options. Nothing's really going to change the fact that it is a single-shot 4570 gun, but you do get some cool different stocks and barrels as well as scopes that you can throw on to make this thing a little bit more interesting. You can have a little pocket sniper or something that can be used at longer range. This weapon is injected into the level list and will show up on the Minutemen, which is a great option for this weapon. I think this is a great gun for the Minutemen. A single-shot, high-damage weapon that is going to be a pretty cool retro design. It makes a whole lot of sense to me. There's also a handful of legendaries that you can find with this mod. 3, in fact. One known as Taylor's Knockout, which is going to be sold by Alan Lee in Far Harbor. You've got the Fowler's Extinction, which is going to be a shotgun conversion. So now it'll fire shotgun shells instead of the standard round, and that is actually sold over at Bunker Hill. And then finally, the Call to the Void, a fancy, mysterious express rifle that is sold over in Nuka World in the market. All in all, a pretty good amount of content for a pretty simple rifle, one that I think I like quite a bit. If you're a fan of my rolling block, then you might be a fan of this one as well. A nice high damage, Western-inspired weapon that has a pretty good integration into the game. Again, a ton of uniques to find, custom animations, and some really cool custom attachments. So if you're into that, I think this is one you should definitely consider checking out. Now for a change of pace, let's check out something with a bit more damage. This is going to be the Universal Sporting Shotgun, otherwise known as the USAS-12 by Diakyuto. This is going to be a complete conversion of the Wars USAS to a new standalone weapon, with some additions to add tons of new attachments and new balancing to make this a proper standalone weapon with a nice bit of variety depending on what you want to put on it. And that includes a ton of optics, a ton of stocks, muzzles, barrels, magazines, and even a couple of matte swaps to change the way this weapon looks. If you don't like the standard gray, you can change it out for some other interesting metal types like gold and even a sort of rainbow aesthetic. Now, for the uninitiated, the USAS-12 is a semi-automatic or full auto assault shotgun. This thing has a huge drum mag and is really, really cool. It's reminiscent of the AA-12, but with a really nice, stylish carry handle. It looks a lot more retro than the AA-12 as well, in my opinion, and it's something that I've also been wanting for Fallout 4 for quite a while. Ever since this thing popped into Wars, I was hoping somebody would make it standalone, and now we have that thanks to Diakyuto. Seems it's their mission to make a lot of the weapons from Wars standalone, so that's pretty cool to see. The default balancing of this weapon is the intention of having more ammo capacity and more rate of fire while being a little less damage than something like the combat shotgun, though that's not going to matter if you're using an overhaul or a rebalance like mine, but if you aren't, then this thing is going to be pretty well balanced in your game, so depending on how you use that, it'll have a different spot in the sandbox. Again, there are a ton of attachments for customization that can change the way the weapon functions and even change the aesthetic if you're into that kind of thing. This, of course, has custom animations since it's coming from Wars. Thanks to Anti-Star, this thing has some really, really cool animations. This thing does have levelless integration, so if you want to find it, it will spawn on Brotherhood scribes, gunner bosses, triggermen, and you can purchase it from vendors, including the Brotherhood vendor, at level 18. You can also possibly find this thing on the legendary loot pools. What's really cool is that is the standard leveled list, but there's also an additional leveled list. Eventually, you may find this on Minutemen, but not until level 25 after they've had some more time to grow, which is a pretty interesting idea. Even though the combat shotgun already exists in the vanilla game, I think the idea of a new late game heavy assault shotgun is a really cool idea. That's why I made my assault shotgun, but this is a really good contender as well. Depending on what your style is and what you like, the USAS is a really cool one. It kind of fits the gap between a retro aesthetic with a really, really cool, unique profile, with also being quite a bit modern and featured in modern shooters. And with some of the modern attachments available in this, I could definitely see that in that kind of load order as well. So depending on who you are, this weapon might be a better fit for your load order. It just depends on what you want. And finally, that takes us to the last mod of the video, known as the C6544 Revolver by Arabot96. Now, Arabot is a new modder on the scene, making a ton of new weapon mods lately, and this is going to be their first attempt at making something with fully custom animations. So while they have made a couple of guns, the animation side of this is going to be brand new to them, an entirely new experience. So this is their first attempt at that, so keep that in mind when we showcase them here in a second. Now then, the idea for the C6544 revolver is going to be a semi-automatic revolver inspired by sort of a combination of the 6520 and the Mateba Unica 6 auto revolver, something that I actually made pretty recently. So this is going to be an entirely fictional design with some inspiration from those two ideas. So this thing is going to have a top-mounted cylinder which is open at the top, very similar to both versions of the Unica 6, but it is going to have a very, very fast fire rate, able to spit out bullets very quickly, but you are still going to have to reload the cylinder. Now, in terms of what it's going to draw from the 6520, I'm pretty sure that's only really going to relate to the general aesthetic. It does have sort of a profile of a semi-automatic pistol while still being cylinder-fed like a revolver, but it's not going to have the mag-fed option that the 6520 has. Instead, you are going to pop out the cylinder and load it that way. So it's not going to have that really, really cool unique factor, even though it has custom animations. I was hoping to see something like that. A mag-fed revolver like the 6520 would have been really cool, but this is just going to add a new set of animations for a swing-out cylinder, which is fine as well. Now, since these are brand new animations and this is their first attempt at it, the only thing I have to say about the animations is that they are a little bit stiff, which is perfectly fine. This is, again, a first attempt at animations, but if there's anywhere to improve, that would be it. Otherwise, the general movement is perfectly fine. It might be a little bit slow and a little bit stiff. Even speeding them up might have changed this quite a bit to make it look a little bit nicer, but they are still perfectly fine for a first attempt. Otherwise, this revolver is amazing. It has some really cool custom attachments, different barrels and muzzles, some really cool custom scopes that are really big, as well as some awesome wood furniture that you can throw on a wood stock on the front and the rear to make this weapon look super, super cool. It has an overall unique profile. It also has some material swaps so you can change this thing to personalize it to your own, and altogether, this thing is awesome. If you want a fancy, unique revolver, this is definitely one I'd consider checking out. In terms of its integration into the game, it is going to be using 44, just like the one that you already had in vanilla, and it is added to the leveled list, and it'll start spawning after level 28. And you can purchase it from vendors as well. Overall, a pretty nice new revolver. I have to say, it's a pretty dang cool design. It would be nice to see, as Aurobot's talent with animation improves, a revisit to this mod to maybe bring it up to a new level, but until then, it's a pretty serviceable weapon as is. Now then, I think that's going to go ahead and wrap things up for today's video. If you've enjoyed any of these mods, consider checking them all out in the description down below. And if you enjoyed the video, consider dropping it a like. If you'd like to support my work directly, again, you can do so over on Patreon, but it is completely optional. And with that, I hope to see you all in the next one. Peace!